Guys, it's Wade Blevins. I had a quick question from a friend asking how to get the gap closed on the foam on the back of the hook when you're putting the marabou on and trying to make sure it gets a good, nice seal there. Just right off the start here, we're using a FW570 dry long number 6 hook from Arex Hooks. This hook provides a little bit bigger gap on some of the foam bodies that we're going to be using on this one for a 5/16 inch foam. And then I'm going to use some really bright contrasting colors to show off how this is done a little bit easier. This is the bright orange foam 5/16 inch cylinder. Got this from Fly South. You can also get it at Riverside, and it's Wapsi foam, just the traditional Wapsi foam. This is strung marabou. I picked this up from Riverside. This is a fluorescent yellow and 1/4 ounce strung. So we use those two colors to really show the difference between the two. The first thing is you want to set up, just get your thread base started. Nice, even, smooth wraps all the way back to about the bend of the hook. Some people will actually trim that line off before they get to wrapping just to cover it up. I always put a 1/2 hitch in at the back just to tie it up nice and tight. I always trim off right there because it really doesn't matter if it's going to be seen or not once the tail's put on. The next step is to select a couple of pieces of marabou that are what I call the good tips. I want something that's going to provide a good looking fly, because a lot of times these are of course going out to clients or going out to people that are donating or looking to first-time users for the fly. So I want something that looks good. So when I say the tip of the marabou, I'm talking about all those little bitty ends on the end of the marabou there. So I'll select a nice looking feather, the one that's got some good plumage to it. And then I'm going to stroke that feather back to get it to where it's, about the length of the hook. And once I get the desired length of the hook, if it's a little bit long, that's fine too. Once I get the desired length, I'm going to switch fingers and I'm going to pinch right where I have that pinch mark there. I'm going to place that at a kind of a 45-degree angle here to the side of the hook closest to me. I'm going to make one loose wrap over the top and kind of snug that down tight. Take a second wrap over the top and then just bind it in, get a few good wraps in there so that it's nice and tight. And then at that point, you can trim that section off as close as possible to that thread wrapping. You usually want to do that at an angle as well, like a 45-degree angle. A lot of times here's where I'm going to add in some crystal flash. So I'll just take a couple of strands of crystal flash and double them over to get the size and style that I want. This is just an orange. It's an 03 crystal flash. And what I do is I just take the tips so I'm not wasting a whole bunch of it. Double that over onto the thread so that I've got about 6 pieces there. Then I'm going to use the thread like a little V to guide it in where I want. And I'll place that right on top. Wrap back towards the ends of the feathers there, just to kind of tie it in. And then at that point you can trim off what you need there. I'm going to take the second feather and do the exact same thing, and it's not necessary. It just provides a little more durability to the fly. It's going to last a little bit longer, because what you're going to see over time is as these fish continue to eat on this fly, those feathers, the marabou won't hold up as well as, say, maybe calf tail or fox tail or squirrel or something like that, or even craft fur. So you want something that's just going to provide a little more durability. I measure it in again to match that original first set of tail. I bring that down at a 45-degree from that first wrap, and now I'm going to take this and I'm going to wrap back over where I just wrapped in all that crystal flash. And 3 or 4 good wraps there just to kind of get it in good and solid. And then again, you want to trim that at an angle so that there's not a whole lot there. I'm going to put in a 1/2 hitch there just to kind of hold that material down. That slid back on me, so whenever that happens, just use your tip of your hook or your scissors bring it back in where it needs to be, tighten it back down. Now here's the part where if you're using a really heavy thread, now this is UTC 140, which is a pretty stout thread. I don't know if you can see that. Sometimes I'll use 70, but I put so much pressure on this, a lot of times the 70 will break. 210 is a little too bulky in my opinion, but it's usable as well. And so I'm just going to make kind of a nice smooth taper down there from that where I tied all that in. And then from that point, I'll put in another 1/2 hitch just to kind of secure the thread in case it breaks for some crazy reason or comes apart in the water. Now at this point, I'm just going to build up the thread base all the way to the eye of the hook, and then loosely back. Same thing, loose wraps forward, loose wraps back, so that it almost evens out. And then right there in the center, one more 1/2 hitch. That's probably, most people would say, a waste of thread. But what that does is provides a thread base for the super glue to really secure in. Here I'm going to just use my whip finisher. I'm going to go in and I'm going to take about 6 wraps here. And I'm not real concerned about how that tightens in. I'm just going to tighten it, snug it down, and trim it off. Because I'm going to put super glue on that hook shank and bind the foam to it. So at this point, this is where you're getting your foam ready and prepped. Again, I'm using the 5/16 inch here, which is just the diameter of the foam. And this is bright orange. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the flat end from the eye of the hook back to about where the feathers are, crease that with my thumbnail, and that gives me a cutting point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and then kind of put it in there at a 45-degree angle and just trim that off. And so now I've got 2 pieces of foam, one flew back here behind. But then it gives you a nice kind of a tail feature on that foam. Now the next step is to get, I like these straight razor blades. I bought a bunch of these years ago. These are the Stanley blades. It's a 4-inch scraper blade. It's a little bit thicker, but it's just easier for me to handle. They're very sharp. You can also use a straight edge razor. The reason I bought these is they were at Mike's Merchandise and they were super cheap. They're like $1.50 a pack, and they're come with 5 of them in a pack, so they'll last quite a while. But then what you do is you just take that foam and as close as you can, get that razor blade in the dead center and work it into the foam. And I go about 3/4 of the way down. Maybe halfway in the front, but in the back, I'm probably close to 3/4, almost to the edge. I don't want to go all the way through because you don't want to slice the foam up, but I do want it to go deep enough that I can seat that onto the hook. At that point, make sure you open your foam up pretty good. Just separate it out with your fingers so that you can place it on the hook. Lately, I've been using the Loctite super glue gel because the gel allows me to kind of manipulate it a little bit better. It does a pretty good seal on it. I really prefer this Gorilla Glue. It's a little more expensive. If you can find it, it's hard to find. I don't know why. I can find it in a lot of other styles, excuse me, like this one, but I'm not a fan of that particular dispenser. I prefer this, the smaller dispenser. It's a lot easier to manipulate. But the Gorilla Glue is a water base that actually, when you use it with water, it hardens it even faster. So it's a great glue, and plus you don't have to worry about it when it's getting wet in the water. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this Loctite, and I'm just going to create a bead of glue right here next to the feathers across the top of the shank of the hook. And you can see that's a pretty substantial amount of glue. It's going to be more than I really need. You don't have to use that much, but in this case, I'm just trying to show in case people can't see it well. At that point, I'm pointing the foam at me so I can see how it's going on. And I'm going to take it and rotate it. And you've got a few seconds here to be able to manipulate that And then I'm going to turn the vise upside down and kind of look at it. And then I can take it off or put it back on depending on where it wants to be. I can clamp my feathers back here in the back and kind of pull them down into that V or that groove. And then if the gap of the hook is not where I want it to be, then I'll try to slide that foam down to where the hook is just coming there in the top. And then I use a spring-loaded clamp. Again, this is something my father found years ago that it's just the pressure of your fingers, and when you release, it closes by itself. These were at Mikey's. There was a whole box of them. They were pretty cheap. And it's stainless steel, so they work really well. You can scrape the super glue off. And I just apply pressure from the front of the foam to the very back, and you can see that glue squeezing out there all the way through. And usually when I see a very small bead come out of the back of the fly towards the feathers, that's when I know that it's soaked all the way through and it's doing what I need it to do to get it sealed properly. And at that point, then I'm just going to use the backing to a sticker. You can use credit card, like an old gift card, or even a business card or something like that, just to get that glue off of there. Now you can see once that's done, that's a really clean seal. There's no gaps on that one. That one actually worked out really well. Plus, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a difference here in the front where the two foams don't line up or meet together closely. This one actually is really, really clean, so I'm pleased with that. And then you can take this super glue and use it to just spread it over the front of the fly. Provides a little more protection. Or if you're going to seal the fly off and paint it, the varnish will do the same thing. And there's going to be a little bit of glue left over that you can use for the thread binding later too. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same thread. This is that UTC 140. Vivus, if you're listening, love to work with you on that too, or for that matter, Semperfli. I just take one wrap around, squeeze it tight, and then make about 4 or 5 wraps to kind of create that thorax. The tag in, I'm going to take and do a half hitch at least twice. What that does is keeps that tag in from loosening up underneath the thread base and coming out if you fish it without an indicator on the top of it. At that point, I'll do a half hitch on the other thread, take my whip finisher, and run it through. Now you can either fish the fly just like that if you think you can see it pretty well and it's visible and easy to see on the water, or you can take a piece of flat craft foam, double it over on a small portion, set it on the top of the foam. A lot of people they just cut a small piece and make it like a V too. You can do it all kinds of different ways. I like this because it just creates a little different look for it. Plus it makes it float a little higher. So, and again, you're just gonna seat that in there, put a couple of half hitches in, and then finish out. A lot of people ask me, why do you put so many half hitches in? Well, the more times you lock that thread into place, the stronger the fly is going to be, the more durable it's going to be over time. I just trim that off. So at that stage, you're pretty much done. You know, the only thing from there is to add your legs. And I like to use this bodkin tool. I just find a kind of a halfway mark just above the hook shank, and I go in, again, kind of at a 45-degree angle all the way through to the other side of the foam. Try to line up with the exact same spot on the other side. Angle it back towards the front and back through the foam. That way your holes on each side are fairly even and you can see them there. I use these Griffin threaders. They're pretty handy. They come 3 or 4 in a pack. It's a little thin wire threader. I'll place that through that hole. You can see it comes out the other side pretty easily. I like the medium round rubber for the legs. This is in bright fluorescent yellow. You can do all kinds of different colors. You can create your own colors. Run the tag in through. Pull it slowly, because if you pull it really fast or tight quickly, it'll make that rubber warped on one end or the other. So the heat to it causes it to do that. Same thing with the other side. Just place it in, try to find the original hole. Sometimes it'll get hung up on the rubber going through. If it does, you just try the other side or use the tool to ream it back out and just pull that through. And once I get that there, I like to hold all 4 legs up over the top, just kind of make sure they're all even. And I cut them down at an angle from front to back. I like the legs in the back to be a little bit shorter than the legs in the front. That's just personal preference. Some people prefer them longer in the back, but for me, I prefer that when they sweep, they're about the same size. And that's it. Then once you get to that point, you can mark it up however you want. You can put a sealant on it like this. That's the ceramic coat sealer. That actually coats the foam, gets all the air bubbles out, and gives a good base for acrylic paints. And then you can go in and you can use various acrylic paints. I like to use a black for the base, then usually a white or a yellow in the middle of the eye, and then black again for the pupil. Or you can use markers, and just the plain old Sharpie markers that are so common in the stores. And you can get all kinds of colors. And use a light color for the base and then black for the eyes or pupils. Or you can do marks on it, all kinds of things. You can even use kind of an airbrush technique on it as well. That's it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any time at samsonebug@gmail.com or on Instagram at samsonebug. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Arex Hooks for your continued support. And thank you to everyone for the follows, the likes, the shares. It's such a great fly, and I appreciate all the support. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Good night.